Thank you, Catherine. We do have some time now for some general questions from the audience. The first is about the trust building process with communities. The audience member wants to know, what are the main elements that are necessary for this trust building process to take place?
So I'm just going to, I've actually got my notes in front of me, and I've come up with some kind of formula that we learned during our process around trust building. If you remember, the project says rich culture should have rich relationships. And for our project with the communities, we started from a place of strength, and the title was coined in consultation with both the communities involved, and they suggested it. And one of the wins or the steps for trust building is coming from a position of recognizing the strength, or literally doing an inventory of the positives that the community already had, because then they value the respect you have. So a place of strength, so rich cultures, when we recognize their strength, we understand they have a richness that they already bring into the equation. And once you recognize it, it's easier. You just feel equipped. You feel confident, both for communities and the people working with them. And it was just beautiful to recognize and honor the courage it takes for each of these people to start off in a new country. And, Maria mentioned before settlement issues and challenges. And despite it, they want to engage with us on this project. And the second one was relationship and respect. Investing in relationships, and it doesn't happen overnight, and it's taken us a couple of months, more than a year. You can't rush into it, and making it people-centered is very important. And people-centeredness takes time, takes effort, takes doing boring meetings, takes attending long cultural events that you might not appreciate initially, but it just grows on you, and you become part of their fabric, and you build relationships that are for life. And it's important that these relationships are built, and you constantly over-communicate the respect. And you do initially, I don't want to say exaggerate the rapport, but maybe to an extent you do that because you want them to know that you care and you're investing in it as an equal partner. So I said rich cultures, relationship and respect. The third one was being real. Being real with what you can achieve because you're not doing it on your own, and being real enough to reassess your goals. And I still remember in a lot of conversations with Maria and Liz from ANROWS, we had to go back to the drawing board because the community was not ready or the community had different ideas. So constantly going back and having realistic goals and reporting it back to your community because they want to know what's happening. You have a meeting, you've decided with your internal teams, but they need to understand how we're progressing. And the other one was resistance. We already spoke about. It's real projects. You're dealing with people. We are not perfect, and there will be resistance. You can't ignore it, but you figure out a way to address it. And the last one was reflecting constantly. And for me, that was a learning because, you're very action-oriented. You have milestones to achieve, but reflecting. And I should thank Liz and Maria for constantly pushing us to make notes, to reflect, and to understand, to think out loud, because once you reflect and you actually physically put those notes down, you understand what worked, what didn't, and you need to be humble enough to go back to the community and say, I can do this, I can't do this, I'm sorry about this. So these were a few of the things that helped us in our project in building trust. And it's not linear. It's, you keep going back to appreciating the richness, you keep going back to building rapport, you keep hitting and facing resistance. You keep changing the way you're reporting. You come up with innovative ways of reassessing goals. And more than anything, you're ready to fail, and you're ready to fail together. When the wins and the losses are shared with the community, it's a different kind of a success story. And we're still learning. And we have come out richer than the communities themselves because how much they open up to you and how much they share and how much you learn. No textbook, no university or webinar is going to give you that. Thanks, Maria.
So, Dipti, thank you for sharing those elements of the trust building process. Now, how did that trust building process, just for the audience on that question, how did that trust building process actually help you pursue more creative projects with the community?
It is, when I initially started, I spoke that our aim was to create culturally appropriate interventions in partnership with the communities, and we had to take in inputs. When you're building trust, it's not just one way. You need input from your equal partner, which is the community. And with the Punjabi community, they wanted to explore art as a medium to get DV prevention messages across. So we've actually collaborated with the community and come up with two thought-provoking plays in Punjabi and Hindi and English, a mix of Hindi and English, reflecting and actually capturing the issues that were raised by the communities themselves through focus groups. So they'll most probably be staged end of this year. They were planned actually in June, but the COVID crisis has dampened all those plans. But the actors, the creative director, the staff doing the recording are all from the community that partnered with us. So they're owning the story, and it has evolved beautifully. So you start with a blank sheet. There was a writer's workshop from which involved community members, and they went through the focus group findings, and they were able to chalk out a script. So it's very exciting, and it's a creatively disturbing exercise too. And when we discussed the script and we went through it, there were many people around the table crying, and it resonated with them, with people in their circles, and we were hoping that it will be powerful, not just for the survivors who've had their stories told, but for communities, for bystanders to take action. And it's art. It's nothing new as such. It has been used as therapy, and we hope it's healing, and it'll call for action. And seeing it on stage, looking it through when an actor brings it to life, will be an interesting experience. Another thing what we've done is we've used the equality wheel, and in our interactions, we did a couple of education sessions with the communities. We noticed that some of the behaviors the community felt was not culturally responsive. So we've actually gone back to the community and asked them to share with us culturally responsive behaviors to form part of the equality wheel. And the response has been very good, both men and women. And I want to emphasize men again, Maria, because that was one of the aspects of the project we invested in, is bringing men on board. We didn't want to isolate them. We wanted them to be part of it. And they've done a fantastic job actually contributing to what works. So hopefully when that takes shape, this is something that the community can use. What is it to be respectful? And when you break it down into behaviors in their own, with their own cultural hues in their own context, it makes it easier to action it, whether it's a man, a woman, a young person. So these were two creative things that we've used. We've also going to have some songwriters put in songs as part of our play, and we're exploring options to do it as a street play in areas where we have large presence of this community. So that's let's see how it goes, and we're happy with the progress.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dipti, for sharing that. Now, Seble, did you have anything to add on this question of trust building with communities?
Yes, I really like to add something, actually. I think one of the really important questions to be answered, especially working this domestic family violence, as we all know, it's a multiple layer there. So communities are vital in this. With our project, as I said earlier, we were being the project worker itself is part of the community leaders network, which has been more than 10 years in Brisbane area and Queensland, ongoing, coming up with what's matter their own community. And it's a loose network run by, administered by Multicultural Australia. So they were being with us all along with this project, and they take it as their own. And because also the settlement relationship, which the workers and also the partner organizations they have, there is trust was being developed. But also, we were being aware during our community conversation when we ran that, it's more than 6 months actually been run that conversation. We were being planned for 3 months, but because the community wasn't ready to do those things, and we were taking time by consulting the leaders or key community members, make sure also we didn't use those gatekeepers, which community sometimes they're very suspicious. We were being very aware with that, so we acknowledge the loose network the community already has. So we have that formal discussion with using the formal leaders. Sometimes when depend on the community, there is a loose group. So we were being open with that, and they see us as a partner to solve the issue which matter for them, or both, which stop them their good life in their families. So we also frame, we didn't use at all in most of the time in the beginning, we say community conversation to manage our good life in Australia, in here. So that framing itself is helping, and that relationship they have, individual participant leaders have a good relationship with those who run the community conversation. That shows them actually we take those whatever been said for better of the community. So again, I think the question was there how you can build. It's not like for a short-term project, but it is being built for a long time. And I think all the community organization, all service providers, they should build that in process. So communities observe and they understand. Sometimes they don't loudly saying it, but they look who's doing for true change. So that kind of relation is actually helping.
Thank you, Seble. And now we have another question from the audience on service providers' perceptions that culture can sometimes be used as a smokescreen for violence against women, and there can be perceptions that we've always done it this way. How do you manage this? Catherine, I'm going to go to you if you have a perspective on this question.
Hi, Maria. So we see this happening quite a bit in the work that we do, and it can come up as a form of backlash in training, for example. And we really highlight the fact that there is no, culture is not fixed, it's constantly changing. There are cultures all around the world and within Australia and within the mainstream Anglo-Australian culture that are patriarchal and perpetuate gender inequality, and that no one culture is more or less violent, and that there's no excuse for violence, and it's not just about that's the way things are, because there is no static, traditional culture to point to. We're all living in the modern world, and people around the world have progressed themselves and progressed others around them to combat gender inequality. It's when people use that, we can challenge that by saying that no, the causes of violence are gender inequality, and that is across all cultures.
I just want to add also a bit that if we have time, Maria.
Yes, we do. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that is really across we see, because we had a target group with men. We work closely with men, and yes, it comes a lot that it not sometimes also even from the women comes out. But one thing we just use is the example of where we are at now. For example, things are not static because we are reflecting back. The change is natural, and adaptation is the way to continue our life in a peaceful way. So we actually get, they came from refugee or migrant background. They are here, they adapt new life. Back home, they cook something differently, but they cook it differently in here, how they adjust that. So with simple example in everyday life, change is constant, and you have to be yourself being adapted with that, or you will have another consequence, which is, if you choose to use violence to solve your conflict, that is actually puts you in jail at the end of the day. It's illegal, and it's not acceptable. So we actually use example, which is now is where they live now and what they were been living in the past. For just a good example, one of our main shared participants was, it was really hard for him in the first few weeks to join the kitchen to prepare meals. He was saying, in my culture, men can't even pass the kitchen door. So how can I do this? It was too much for him to accept by age, his bit mature age. And we were saying, we are here now because back home maybe women don't have jobs and things are not the same. But in here, the kitchen, everything is different. And the other male was being saying, I wasn't cook by home, but I did it now. It's really good to be this. And so challenging and create a space where you can actually change yourself and reform yourself. And that at the end of the program, actually, that gentleman are joining the kitchen, and he enjoyed the being in that space, learning new skills. So I think sometimes we need to use a simple example what they actually how they can understand is important, because sometimes too much wording around will not help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for acknowledging the way the culture changes and the adaptations that are happening. We do have time for two more questions. I might go to the question about how to manage both prevention and capacity building activities on a small budget. If I can go to Catherine here to comment on that.
Yes, sorry. Did you say how to manage prevention projects on a small budget?
Yes, prevention activities as well as capacity building activities on a small budget.
Yes. So there's a few things that we do. So one of the things we've done in making the link is making sure that the advisory group members for the project represent as many regional areas as possible across all of the areas we're working in. And that helps us to increase our outreach, but also to understand what's happening locally and to adapt and change the direction of our project as we need to. And we do that on a number of our prevention projects. We also look at different opportunities to maximize networking and collaboration across projects. So, for example, we have a number of projects with overlapping areas of work where we're delivering education sessions to women on gender equality and related topics. So we have the Gambling Awareness Project and the Rural and Reproductive Health Project connected to making the link. So we were able to make contact about multiple projects at the same time. So that's a really strategic way to approach working working with multiple stakeholders. And at the same time, I think I mentioned before, but that we planned our travel to different regions strategically, so making sure that we aligned with activities that were already happening in the area, whether that's parenting groups or English classes, so that we can add on to where people are already meeting and not have to, overexhaust people, asking people to come together again, and then also adding to professional development calendars and asking organizations to meet more times than they're able to throughout the year. And also what's great about having project partners is that we were able to coordinate venue hire and catering with local caterers, for example, through our project partners. And so, for example, in Bendigo with Loddon Compass Multicultural Services, we use the Friday Food Safari to provide catering for a community education group. So that's, I think those are some ideas about how to work within a limited budget, which we all have to do.
Thank you, Catherine. And we now have a related question about continuity and ensuring that the activities of the project or the impact of the project continue after the actual funding finishes. And I'll go to Dipti now for her perspective on this question of continuity.
Thanks, Maria. Right from the beginning, the participatory action research approach held good for us because the community was an equal partner, and we invested heavily in developing community's conceptual understanding and recognition of domestic violence. So there were a lot of things that we did to empower the community. In fact, we got them trained in research methodology. We got them trained in understanding domestic violence using services of recognized domestic violence awareness organizations. And once you get a group of people to actually think and own the concept and literally localize it, it just helped it make it much more sustainable. They are more self-reliant, like the creative ideas that came up after that. They want to take it forward. In fact, with the South Sudanese community, they went on to start an adolescent girls group that meets every week, and this was their own initiative. It was not part of our plans. It was not part of what we had in our goals. It was not part of our milestones. It was their own initiative. Or with the Punjabi community that used a survey that was designed as part of the project in another local health district, in another local government area. So they started owning it, and they took the leadership to carry it on. And there's different opportunities that arise when they take the risk and when they give it a shot. So there were skill-building opportunities that were used initially in the project that has equipped them to continue what was initiated and to build on it and do it much, much better than what we could have ideated. So going back again to the piece on trust, when we invest for a community to improve, they value it, and they go on to do bigger and better things than we could have imagined when we started. So it was important to do the initial bonding and foundation laying right so that the project is much more sustainable. And another good thing I noticed is because of the investment in sustainability, we're able to tap into the richness and the resourcefulness of these communities we have worked with for other projects we're working on within our local health district, Maria.
Thank you, Dipti. And I know, Seble, this is an area that you've been reflecting on quite a lot as well. Did you have any comments about continuity?
Yeah, I think, with the small money, it's hard to deliver what we have been delivering. But because of the support we got from the other agencies, which is, for example, RILS, Refugee Legal Service, and also Multicultural Australia, and also other bunch of service providers we were been working together from getting a free space to deliver, but also the key partner was community leaders. They were being voluntary. They were being giving us a lot of their time to engage, and that's the key for us. Partnership and collaboration and filling the gap is really helping us in terms of delivering beyond our project funded for. So, as I said, we were being only funded to address the 6 community from African community groups, but we were being managing more than 27 community groups from 12 ethnic background, and more than 167 people were engaged in our research in the community conversation, and more than 200 people was being engaged in total in this program. So that happened because we have that good relationship with other service provider. And for example, UQ was helping us in terms of finding literatures in behind, and also RILS is helping on terms of the legal framing our message as a for micro video for multicultural community managing change program. So all this happened because that collaboration supports each other, and still ongoing. We are continue doing it, because that's one of the things we learn from the community. They don't like to see one thing only to being suddenly there's a project and then gone by the time community are engaged. So we are now, even for continuity after the project, the funding period, we partner with states to pilot good life learning from early on, because that's the community was asking early education about gender and about also law in Australia is important. So we were managing to deliver a 10 weeks program with partnering with RILS and TAFE. So this helping to continue the work we've done, because it's not 1 or 2 years, 3 years work. It needs to be continued. So that partnership is really helpful for communities or on a long-term change in this space.
Thanks, Seble, and some really good points there about partnership as well. As we come to the end of our question time, we had more than one question come in from the audience about how to evaluate interventions in this space and how to measure success factors in CALD communities. So I'll now go to Seble for an answer on this question.
Thanks, Maria. Yeah, I think the action research method is really useful. I was keep saying that to you, for your organization, having that in with us and using of methodology through our project is really key in terms of to be flexible. Again, as we said earlier, community. It takes time when it's for these multi-layer issues. So we use evaluation as first we plan with the community leaders, bicultural workers to deliver some projects. And then if it's not working, we actually continuously, we have the backup and plan that with the participants, how they want that program to continue. So using those methodology in our process, I think actually helping us to engage a lot of community leaders and they've been more confident actually to engage because it is not only one way, it's a two-way approach. So that helped in terms of for us to be flexible enough and also in the funding space. The funding provider, because we have ANROWS overseeing this and giving that freedom of being changing constantly to fit the communities. That actually whatever we achieve is because of those methodology we use through our work.
Thanks, Seble. And I'll also go to Catherine now. Any last reflections on the evaluation in this initiative?
Hi, yes. There's not too much to add to what everyone said, but I would say also, of course, in addition to evaluation forms for our funders in terms of the immediate and short-term effectiveness of a program, important, or what I like to do is take a lot of notes, and especially in training and education sessions, because then you're able to identify what are some of the common themes that come up, and similar to what was mentioned before about that smoke screen of using culture as an excuse not to talk about gender equality or not to touch the subject of family violence, just being able to identify those common comments and then address ways to unpack those and to address them in future conversations. And then also, it's also kind of following up with people, so not just feedback forms, but after training, but also following up with participants in programs that you're working in. So, for example, we hear from women that do the Women's Leadership Program called PACE through MCWH, what they've done since the program, so whether that's public speaking or new job opportunities or even creating their own business and linking up with local councils and local organizations to progress their own work. That's a really good indicator for us that the work we've been doing is successful.
Thanks, Catherine. And I will check back in with Dipti now to see if she wanted to add a few comments on this topic.
Can you hear me, Maria?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. What we really like about the participatory action research, like a lot of my colleagues have said, is the partnership with the community and keeping community central. And I'd like to take from Catherine's notes about reflection. And not only reflecting individually for us as project workers, but reflection in collaboration with the community. And this reflection helped us a lot to actually go back to the drawing board, like I mentioned before. And it was a shared ownership with both the project team and the communities. So the outcomes were celebrated jointly, and the failures and the challenges were fixed jointly. So it was, as Seble also mentioned, it was a constant cycle of learning and applying and valuing the richness and strengths that already exists within a community to address this issue of domestic violence, and jointly fighting against it and empowering communities to face it and make it more sustainable, their efforts more sustainable.
Thank you, Dipti, and thank you to all of our presenters, as well as the teams who sent in videos. A really big thank you has to go to all of the CALD projects for their fantastic work in this initiative. Thank you to all of those of you who joined us today for our webinar. You can download the full Research Insights report and see the CALD project's digital and project stories on the ANROWS website. If you are interested in viewing any more of our webinars, please also visit the ANROWS website. Thanks again, everyone.